Henry Vaughan's The Retreat uses metaphorical language throughout to express the sense of wonder and curiosity Vaughan felt as a child, comparing it to the mundanity of adult life. To him, the creativity and innocence of childhood are sacrosanct. However, it is abandoned as we grow up. The title, The Word Retreat, also represents a retreat of innocence, and a retreat to a better place, childhood. The title perfectly encapsulates the themes of growing up in the poem. The first few lines of the poem are easy to make sense of, describing how he feels about childhood, almost painting it as sacred. Before I understood this place, appointed for my second race, or taught my soul to fancy aught but a white celestial thought, states lines 3 to 16 of the poem. He uses white celestial thought to describe the blissful ignorance of his youth. The reader might at first think this is a joyous poem, but that's only on the surface. The poem attempts to convey how we are corrupted as we grow up through metaphor and imagery. We see this as the poem develops. The writer states, "Before I taught my tongue to wound, my conscience with a sinful sound, or had the black art to dispense a several sin to every sense." These words come off as foul. Moments prior, Vaughan discussed the purity of the soul of a child with words like white and celestial. It is at this point the reader understands that Vaughan is trying to convey the desire to go back to his childhood. This is shown when he says, "That I might once more reach that plain where I left my glorious train." The train here is referring to his innocence. We see his pain that he cannot reclaim the days of yore. Towards the end of the poem, we see how he perceives progress, stating, "Some men a forward motion love, but I by the backward steps would move. And when the dust falls to the urn, in that state I came, return." These aspects of the poem are apparent to the reader. However, there's a deeper spiritual meaning. The subtle use of imagery and metaphor relates childhood to heaven, juxtaposing that with the hell of being an adult. On the second line of the poem, he states how he shined in his early infancy. There's a similar sound in the lines afterwards, as he writes, "Or taught my soul to fancy aught but a white celestial thought." The rhyme in infancy and fancy suggests that during our childhoods, we were carefree. We did whatever we fancied. This is further exemplified when we consider the image of a white celestial thought, which is a traditional depiction of the Christian heaven. Vaughan also keeps going with an extended metaphor about the afterlife, as the Christian depiction of hell also appears in the poem. He states in line 15, "Before I taught my tongue to wound my conscience with a sinful sound, or had the black art to dispense a several sin to every sense, but felt through all this fleshy dress, bright shoots of everlastingness." The poem explores metaphysics and how the innocence of childhood transcends physical form, by juxtaposing it with these vile, hellish descriptions. The words sinful, black art, several sin to every sense, everlastingness, give the reader an impression that not having the blissful ignorance of childhood is hellish. Both poems talk about the ethereal state of childhood, using words that evoke the image of heaven to refer to childhood. Through these extended metaphors and imagery, the authors aim to convey the purity and innocence of childhood, contrasting it with the adult that has become corrupted.
William Knox's poem, The Season of Youth, uses vivid imagery and metaphors to express the passage of growing older and the nostalgia of youth that you look back upon as you age. The poem itself seems that it's talking more about growing from middle age to elderly, but it has themes that apply to any point in a person's life. The structure of the poem is a basic quatrain with an A, B, B, C, C, D, D rhyme scheme. In the first line, he says, "Rejoice, mortal man, in the noon of thy prime." Noon usually refers to the exact middle of a day, or in this case, middle age. At the same time, it says noon of thy prime, which indicates that the subject of the poem is at its strongest. I think this indicates a period of time between the late 30s, not necessarily middle age, but not really a teenager either. The rest of the first stanza continues his description of getting older and the changes that your body goes through. He says, "Ere your brow be traced by the plowshare of time, ere the twilight of age shall encompass your way, and thou droopest like the flowers to rest in the clay." The whole stanza put together gives the impression that you must hold on to the remaining youth that you have before you become old and frail. like a flower drooping into the clay. The next stanza speaks directly towards the joy and seemingly endless pleasure of childhood. The first 3 lines of this second stanza speak of a celebration, a feast of some kind. This kind of imagery evokes the image of a carefree childhood, unburdened by the pressures of being an adult. The stanza also directly echoes the previous stanza with the idea of holding on to your youth. These 2 lines address this especially when the author states, "Let the joy dance be wove, let the timbrels resound, while the springtide of life in your bosom is high." Third stanza is about love, which seems to be the only thing in this poem that you actually carry with you for your whole life. The first 2 lines talk about how love can bring meaning and light into your life, with the simile, "Let the wife of your love, like the sun of thy day, throw a radiance of joy o'er the pilgrimage way." A pilgrimage is often a long journey or a treacherous path. So these lines can be interpreted as a wife can bring light and joy into your journey or life. The last 2 lines of this stanza allude back to the first stanza by using a very similar word choice and format. It mirrors the first stanza ere thy sentence structure and a very similar flower metaphor. More specifically, the lines are, "Ere the shadows of grief come, like night from the west." This clearly speaks of a time as you get older and death is growing near. The west is also where the sun sets, so it's almost as if the sun is going down on your life. The last stanza echoes the start of the poem yet again. It goes, "Rejoice, mortal man, in the noon of thy prime, but muse on the power and progress of time. For thy life shall depart with the joy it hath given, and the judgment of justice awaits thee in heaven." This stanza seems to be fairly straightforward. It calls for the subject of the poem to think deeply about how time moves on and how you will spend your time on earth. Because when you die, your actions will be judged accordingly in heaven.